Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm TJ, welcome to my channel. Now, I know it's been a couple of weeks since the last video, and you're expecting it a lot sooner, but unfortunately my life got a little bit hectic, so yeah, bad luck. We're here now anyway, ready for episode 2. So, let's get this show on the road. Okay, here we go with today's episode, which is green tea versus black tea. What's the difference? Now, last week we discussed how different teas need to be brewed differently. How green tea needs to be brewed at 80 degrees and black tea needs to be brewed at 100 degrees. Today we're going to be going in deeper as to why these teas are different and why they need to be treated differently. To start off with, I want to look at the process of how the tea gets from the tea plant to your teacup. So what happens is the tea is plucked from the bush. Now the bush is known scientifically as the Camellia sinensis plant, more colloquially just tea plant. Now green tea and black tea come from the exact same plant, so you don't need to worry about differences there. But as soon as they come off the plant and start getting treated, that's where you find some differences. Now let's take a look at green tea and the first step of what happens to green tea when it reaches the factory floor. The first step it goes through is called fixing. Now what happens with fixing is the tea gets de-enzymed in order to avoid oxidization. Now oxidization is what happens to black tea, and so in order to keep it as green tea, you avoid it. It's quite simple. Now the way they fix the tea is by applying heat. Now there's different applications of heat. Some are roasted in pans, some are roasted at much higher temperatures, some are lower temperatures. But the main importance is that it's fixed to avoid that oxidization. Now black tea goes through a very similar process called withering. Now with withering, all you're doing is literally withering the leaves. So you're blowing hot air onto the leaves in order to wither them. That way they're more soft and malleable to be processed later. Now the next step applies to both green teas and black teas, and that's called rolling. There's some slight different variations on how it works though with green teas to black teas. So the first type of rolling is the orthodox method, which can be used for both green teas and black teas, and that simply is either hand rolling the leaves or rolling it using a machine. That's simply just creating it into those little balls. Now this creates a high quality tea for the black tea, and just pretty much all the teas when it comes to green tea. Now black tea can also go through a process known as CTC, or cut, tear, curl, or crush, tear, curl, where basically the tea, instead of being hand rolled as whole leaves, is put through a machine called a rotovane, where it's teared apart, crush, tear, curl, into evenly sized pieces, into fine even pieces you would say. They're really small bits. It's the sort of tea that you'll find in a tea bag. Now this tea is generally of a lower quality than that of the orthodox method. But you know, it's still tea and I still drink it. Okay, now after the black tea is finished being rolled, either with the orthodox method of rolling it by hand or using a machine, or with the CTC method, either way, it then goes into a process known as oxidization. Now this is the biggest difference between green tea and black tea, because green tea intentionally avoids this oxidization process, where black tea uses this oxidization to invigorate the tea and bring out all the flavors that you know and you love. Now this process is quite a complicated process, where the tea is placed into a room where the temperature, the oxygen level, and the humidity are all perfectly balanced at the exact levels that they need to be in order to oxidize the tea. Now this process is what browns the tea. It gives that tea leaves that dark brown look. Also gives your tea that beautiful dark brown color and the beautiful rich aromas and that deep texture of it that you get with your black teas that you just don't get with your green teas. So oxidization is a very important part of the process. Green tea avoids it, whereas black tea uses it for its own advantages. Now the next step is done by both teas, and that's simply drying the tea. Now there's a few different methods which I'm not going to go into in this video, but the most important part to know is that both teas need to be dried out to the point where there's essentially no moisture left and you get those nice dry tea leaves that we all know and love. So those are the different processes in which tea is made. The green tea avoids oxidization and the black tea uses it to its advantage. That's the main difference between the processes. Now let's talk about some of the different ways you experience the teas. Where you have your black tea, your dark, robust, beautiful flavors, great for breakfast teas. And you've got your green teas, your lighter, much more delicate flavors, you could say. And how choosing those different teas at different times for different reasons. Now one of the reasons you might choose green tea over black tea is a little thing called antioxidants. Green tea is full of them and they are super good for you. Yay, healthy tea, am I right? So by avoiding the oxidization process, you're able to develop these antioxidants in the tea. And they're super good for you. Now, a lot of people will claim miracle things by antioxidants, that it's the way to lose weight and it's the way to detox. Now, I don't stand by those things. I believe that antioxidants are definitely good for you and part of a balanced diet and regular exercise. Sure, definitely going to help you lose weight. But I disagree with it on the detox method. I think if you eat healthy and exercise, you probably don't need to detox. But hey, that's me. If you want to get into an argument in the comment section, go ahead. It'll be fun. Anyway, so it's full of these antioxidants and that's fantastic. Now, black tea also has antioxidants. It's just not so much due to that oxidization process. So that's again one of the main differences, that the green tea is known to have slightly more health benefits. That's not to say that black tea is unhealthy. Not at all. Black tea is fantastically good for you. As I said, it still contains antioxidants. And it's absolutely delicious, it's a great way of hydrating, and plenty of other nutrients and other fantastic things. Now, one thing black tea does have over green tea that you probably well know is caffeine. Now, black tea is known to have about 1/3 of the amount of caffeine of a cup of coffee, whereas green tea only 1/4 of the amount of caffeine. Now that might not sound like much of a difference, but let me tell you the actual numbers. Now green tea only has 8 to 30 milligrams of caffeine per cup, whereas black tea is actually 40 to 100. So you're getting significantly more caffeine from the black tea. And that's not actually a bad thing. Caffeine is not necessarily bad for you. For me, that's why I drink black tea in the morning. It gives me a slight pick-me-up without the intense caffeine hit that you get from a cup of coffee. It's why most people use black teas as breakfast teas in general. And it's also why I avoid black tea at night, because I know that the caffeine in it will affect my sleep cycle. So I go for a green tea, or even maybe a peppermint tea, which is green but not green tea. So green tea has a lot less caffeine in it than black tea, making it a much more gentle tea in general. It makes you feel softer, it makes you feel cooler and more relaxed. Whereas I find black tea, as it does have more caffeine, tends to be more of a stimulant. It makes me feel invigorated and ready to live life. Not necessarily psycho like a big double shot latte would, but just genuinely more energized and ready to live my life. And that's to me really the biggest difference between black and green tea, is the way that it makes you feel. For me, green tea is a calming, soothing time. Maybe sitting on a couch and just relaxing of an evening. Whereas a black tea, I use it more of a, let's go, let's study, let's live life. So the differences between green teas and black teas are not just in the practical processes. They're actually also about how you feel. Now we talked last week about how green tea and black tea are different. I just want to reiterate this because it's very important. If you brew your green tea with boiling water, you will burn it and you will have a bad time. So make sure your water is at about 80 degrees for your green tea, and you're gonna enjoy it much more. And black tea, your 100 degrees is fine, but like I said last week, I tend to let the boiling water roll off a little bit and settle down before pouring it in the cup. Just enough so it's probably about 98 degrees. That's just my personal preference though. The regulations say 100 degrees, so if you pour it in boiling, it's probably not going to hurt. Now, one last thing before we go. We've been talking a lot about green tea today, and you might be getting confused with green tea and matcha. Now, matcha is the stuff that's used in Japanese tea ceremonies, and it's a very different product to what I've been talking about today when it comes to green tea. It's this dissolvable powder that gives a very tangy and very intense flavor that a lot of people don't really like at first, and they say, oh, if this is green tea is terrible. Well, that's not green tea. It's a different product. It's still technically tea, and we might talk about the differences between green tea and matcha in a later episode. But just know that the Japanese green tea matcha is not the same as standard green tea, which comes from the tea leaves. So that pretty much wraps up today's video. I hope you've really enjoyed it. I'm glad to be back behind the camera for you guys. So if you've enjoyed today's episode, please drop me a like, subscribe to the channel for more fantastic tea content like you've heard today. And maybe let me know, what do you prefer, green tea or black tea? Tell me in the comments. Maybe get into an argument over whether or not you should be having black tea at night before bed. I know I avoid it, but some people say it doesn't affect them. So, whatever you reckon. There's stats say there's caffeine in black tea. So, what do you think's going to happen? Anyway, folks, I guess that'll do for today. I'm TJ, signing off. Hooroo.